You're listening to She's the Business podcast.
Have you ever felt frustrated by the slow growth of your audience and thought, how can I get myself in front of more new people so I can attract the right people into my audience? Well, if you're using primarily social media as your main method of building an audience, then this could be potentially the reason why you're finding it so hard and so slow. So today's episode, I can't wait to bring you, is talking all about a different way to grow beyond your audience and get more exposure, and it's not paid ads. So stick around because you're not going to want to miss this one.
Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Osborne, and in my 23 years of business and marketing, I've built many brands to become multi-billion-dollar companies. And just in the last 10 years, I've built 2 online businesses of my own from my dining room table with 2 little babies running around at my feet. I've made it my mission to inspire you to get out of your own way and become the successful business owner who's living the lifestyle you really desire without all the hustle. This is She's the Business podcast, made by women for women. This is your weekly dose of motivation and inspiration.
Today, we're talking all about how you can gain more visibility and more exposure through media that is not your own social media networks. Now, today's very special guest is Lisa Simone Richards. She's a PR and visibility strategist who works with coaches to break through the noise, get more eyes on their business so that they can be seen online everywhere without spinning their wheels on social media. She's all about getting consistent visibility and becoming known as the expert authority so that they can reach the right people to increase sales. Now, Lisa shares with us more than 10 ways that you can get free exposure, which positions you as an expert authority. She also touches on the number 1 mistake to avoid when asking to get exposure and her ABCs of visibility, which is the different ways that we can create visibility and how to choose the right mix for our own business. There's absolutely so much coming up in this episode, so please grab a pen and paper because you're probably going to want to take notes. It's an absolute brilliant episode, and without further ado, let me play it for you. Okay, and welcome. I'm here with Lisa Simone Richards. And Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you like to give the listeners a bit of background as to who you are, who you work with, and what it is that you do? What do you help your clients with?
Sure, gladly. So hi, everyone who's listening. My name is Lisa Simone Richards. I'm a PR and visibility strategist, and I work with online coaches who want to get seen everywhere. And really what that means is I help my clients learn how to leverage other people's platforms. I am a huge believer that instead of growing slowly by 1 follower, 1 email subscriber at a time, there's somebody out there who has a group of our ideal clients hanging out, whether that's listening to a podcast, watching a morning show, reading a website. So I love to share with people, where's that place all your ideal clients are hanging out? Who's the person who's the gatekeeper who's in charge of whether or not you can get access to that audience? And how do you show up with so much value that when you reach out to this gatekeeper, they say yes and let you on their podcast, TV show, social media network, whatever it might be, so that you can get in front of new audiences, but also have somebody else's endorsement while you're at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this because it's exactly the conversation that I have with so many of my clients, especially in those first few years, because it can feel like you're pulling teeth or pushing something up a hill, trying to build an audience. You know, where are all these people? I know there's lots of people out there, but why aren't they finding me? Why aren't they coming into my audience? And, you know, I can just see so many people spending hours and hours and hours on social media, kind of creating content and trying to grow their audience that way. And it's like, you know, that they're actually already in someone else's audience. And so getting that leg in to get in front of them and have a conversation, and actually you get that attachment of trust from the person who has already created the audience. So their trust in you, bringing you in front of the audience, that sort of trust gets transferred onto you. It's just such a great way to grow your own audience and your visibility. So thank you so much for bringing this topic to us today. I think this is absolute gold. If you're listening and you're in the car, you might want to save this episode and come back with a pen and paper later, because I think that we're going to cover some really, really good points that you should note down for sure. Maybe talk a little bit about that difference in the different way that you're building an audience. As you just mentioned, people getting in front of an audience that already exists, that they're there and there's sort of a gatekeeper there. So what's the balance between doing your own social media and creating your own content and trying to build your audience versus doing that? What do you recommend to your clients?
Yeah, there's one of the things I talk about frequently is the huge difference between creating content and actually getting visibility. So creating content and being on social media, doing the reels, the stories, the TikToks, the static posts, that's all going to nurture our existing audience, the people who are already on our email list, the people who are already following us. But the mistake that I see a lot of online coaches make is that they think, okay, if I just create the content and maybe I use the hashtag online business coach, this is going to bring new followers my way. And the truth is, maybe 6 years ago, using hashtag online business coach might have done something for you, but that 100% does not work today. So doing all of the content on our social platforms, fantastic. When else have we had the opportunity to control what we want to put out there, the way we want to communicate it, exactly when we want to put it out? It's so fantastic that we have social media to give us that option. Even beyond that, with social media, we can send a DM to our ideal clients. We can send them a voice note. We can send them a video. So I definitely don't want to discount the power of social media, but we have to make sure we're focusing on visibility. How are we making sure that we're getting in front of new people constantly? I actually had a call with somebody last week and she was sharing with me, Lisa, my email list has 200 people on it, but I'm not getting more sales after the last 6 months. I'm like, right, because you're selling to the same 200 people over and over again, and you can't expect your sales to grow from that. So we have to make sure that we're not just showing up on our social platforms, but we're really getting those external endorsements that bring us in front of new audiences. So now we can get visibility. And now when we have people following us or subscribing to our email list, the content that we're creating can do its work to nurture people. So they're two totally separate things, but we have to make sure we're doing both of them.
And I think that, some people listening may be going, well, but if I do reels, they're getting really big reach and things like that. So for somebody who's thinking, they might still be in the camp of, I'm being told by some social media coach that I need to just do reels and I'm getting in front of lots of people. What would you say the difference is in getting in front of people through a reel that might get some reach to new people versus doing something like this kind of media where we're actually actively going into someone else's audience? Like, what is the difference in terms of the result they're going to expect?
The first thing that I want to say is there's something out there that's going to work for everybody. Someone is going to build their business using Pinterest. Someone else is going to build their business using YouTube. Someone might build their business using Reels. So definitely not to say don't do Reels, but if that's not the thing that lands authentically with you and you feel like for me personally, I love to consume social media. I love to scroll on Instagram. I love to like and comment. Do I like putting my own stuff out there? Honestly, not really. I don't think it's interesting for me to go out and snap a picture of my dinner and put it online. I'm pretty resistant to posting online. I've been married for almost 7 months now. There isn't a single photo of my husband on the static feed anywhere. Love it to pieces, but I'm just not a huge social person. For those people who don't necessarily resonate with it, there is another option. The other thing I want to bring it back to is, let's say you are doing Reels or whatever it might be, and it is bringing a number of leads. Just check in. Are they qualified leads? Because it's fantastic to get in front of 100,000 people. Just are they the kind of people who are going to potentially buy from you? So again, it's that distinction between, are we looking for followers or are we looking for buyers? And really going beyond the vanity metrics of, oh, great, 10,000 people saw it. Again, if they're your ideal client, fantastic. But if they're not, is that going to serve you?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that was going to be my next question. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I often work with my clients on is the difference between you getting reach and people seeing your reel, them actually becoming followers, and then them actually being qualified leads, like actually being the real people who do want your stuff. And I know, because I've experimented with some reels, having a bit of fun, I don't take my social media too seriously. I do like to write a lot, which is why I do long captions when I do my posts. But, with reels, I was like, look, I've got no idea what I'm doing. So I'm just going to create some for a bit of fun and have something different out there. And I feel like it can get so noisy in the feed and social media. So most of my reels have actually been really unbusinessy, me walking on the beach, you might see my feet, and then, something that's a little bit relaxing and chilled and, maybe has a very minor message of just being proud of what I've done that day, something like that. My reel that got the most views, and it wasn't huge, I think it may have hit like 4,000 but it sort of was really quick. I don't know how. Anyway, it wasn't business related at all. It was a whale breaching when I was on holiday. It was like this really awesome, we went whale watching, and there was a whale that breached right next to the boat. So I was like right there. And I put that up, and heaps of people looked at it. And, that's the thing. I was like, well, but that doesn't mean anything. That was a bit of fun. They've looked at it. That doesn't mean that they're going to follow my account. That doesn't mean that they're my ideal audience. That just means that they were liking watching a whale breaching, and they probably watched it over and over again, right? So, it's thinking about that and looking at that content, I think, is the difference, isn't it? Because when you're creating some content with someone, like co-creating like we are, we've got a message, we've got a set audience, we're bringing you something of value. And that message is going to land so much better because we're in a sort of a trusted space, this environment where I'm reaching out to you to come and talk to my audience about this topic, about getting visibility and exposure and PR related. We'll talk a little bit about what the difference is, because I know that's a really important thing for us to talk about. Social media gets so much discussion and it's so visible because we're all on it all the time, but we tend to forget that there's many other ways to reach an audience. And I think that's the difference. So, we're coming in here and creating this platform for you to speak to my audience is different to posting a reel and having random strangers potentially looking at it on social media and you don't know who they are. You've got no kind of control over it.
Yeah. One of the things I always like to talk into is the difference between paid media, social media, and earned media. And let's even focus it right now on the differences between social media and earned media, because that's just what we've been talking about the most. With social media, it is fantastic to be able to get in front of that many people. And just like I was saying, having those powerful DMs, etc. But one of the things to even keep in mind of what is the lifespan of your social content. So that reel on whales, is it still bringing in new followers 3 weeks later, or did it do its job for a day and then it kind of trickled down from there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's
did it? Even just as a question, I'm so curious if that was your experience.
So I think it does well for a couple of days and then it will trickle. So there'll be people now who might see it because they've either looked at a hashtag or they've come onto my account to see what I'm doing. And then they're looking at my reels. So they're like going back into old content. But the amount of people who are doing that are very minimal, aren't they?
So that's one of the reasons I love to preach earned media over social media, simply because with social media, your content has such a short lifespan, maybe a few hours really to maximum a few days. But the great news with doing things like earned media, so being on a podcast just like this one, I can search my name on iTunes and I'll find interviews I did since 2016, 2017. People who are doing their research on me can still come across that. So the content is consistently and always working for me years later. Whereas with social media, that content's going to take a little bit more digging to find. So there is such a power to having content that has an evergreen lifespan to it versus a matter of days or maybe even just a few hours. And even on another note, there's a huge difference between us saying on social media or on our paid media saying, hey, look at me, I'm awesome, I'm a really good coach, versus, you may be saying, hey, audience, listen to Lisa, she's really good at what she does. So there's that difference between, hey, look at me, I'm great, versus somebody saying about you, hey, look at them, they're great. It's also the difference between when a client Googles you, because trust me, before they take out their credit card to work with you, they are going to search your name just like you would before you worked with someone. And what's the difference between them seeing you on all of your own social platforms and your own website, or seeing you on your own social platforms, but also seeing you featured on podcasts, also seeing you featured on, even Facebook or Instagram lives on somebody else's account, you being interviewed for a website? How does that shift the positioning of how a client potentially sees you now versus just being on your own networks?
Yeah, that's really great. And can we do a slight segue for a moment into paid media? You mentioned it very briefly. So are we talking with paid media, are we talking about ads, or are we talking about paid PR?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh, this is a button. What's paid PR? Like seriously, pay to play is not the jam that I'm a part of. So I'm sure many of us have gotten that DM in our Instagram account. Hey, coach, you're doing great things. I love your account. We're actually working on a roundup for Forbes of the 30 best coaches, and we'd love to include you. Is this something you want to be a part of? tiny little star, fine print, charges may apply. Yeah, no, that's paid for PR. Delete those immediately. Run away from those messages. So here's what happens when you get that DM in your inbox. There are companies that will write a press release, and actually somebody emailed me today and it's like, look at my press release. And I was like, oh, I haven't written one of those since 2011, man. Though that's like dinosaur ages styles now. Yeah. But yeah, what they'll do is they'll write a press release about, whoever paid for the article, submit it to a newswire, which is something that anybody can do. And it gets published on some back page that never shows up on Forbes.com or whatever the site is. So it's really the equivalent. Okay, we were saying as before we even turned on the recording, getting to know each other, my cat Ginger hopped up on screen and we were talking about how much I love them. Yeah. I could write a press release saying my cats, Peaches and Ginger, are the absolute best cats in the world. And guess what? If I pay for it to go on the newswire, it will be published on the back end of yahoo.com or one of those websites. But Peaches and Ginger are the best cats in the world. While I am absolutely certain that's true, it's not necessarily factual. It's not an endorsement. I just paid to put that up somewhere. So it has no validity. It has no hold to it. So when someone says that to you, hey, we're doing the round of the best 30 coaches, please don't give them your money. It's just the equivalent of me writing a press release saying Peaches and Ginger are the best cats in the world. That's what you've paid somebody for.
Yeah. And I think, when you get those, they're very cleverly disguising themselves as one of the big media platforms. I think Yahoo maybe does a few, but you often see ones that are like trying to be Entrepreneur Magazine, but there's something else a little bit different, like Entrepreneur Herald or Entrepreneur Weekly, which I don't think are the same publication. So it's really just a money-making exercise. And thanks for sharing that with us, because I think there's so many of these things coming through. You really get in your social media, in your DMs, you'll be getting people all the time pitching you like, we want to be part of this article, that article. And if you're one of 30, top 30 or top 50, all you're doing, and I know because I've seen this being done before, they'll ask you to submit your own blurb and they'll literally just publish it. So you're writing the content, you're paying, and they're publishing it on some platform that people probably aren't really going to see, and doing a little bit of research into, is this even a valid publication? And any way unsure, you can do that. But I think when you see those and you don't recognize it, don't even bother, delete them straight out of your inbox. The big publications you can do a pitch for, and that's really what Lisa is really great at. And we can talk a little bit about, what we're looking at when you want to do some media. Where do you even start? What do you look for? And how do you decide who you might pitch to?
Yeah, where I love to start with that is what I call the ABCs of visibility. And this is really understanding what is the intention behind being seen. And I'll even give you a story to explain this. So the ABCs of visibility, let's break down which each letter stands for. A stands for awareness. This is when you need your ideal client to know that you actually exist. So for me, back before I was in online PR and online media, I actually used to be a fitness publicist. And so I would work with a ton of trainers, studio owners, and trainers would always tell me, Lisa, I would love to be featured in Oxygen, Strong, Muscle and Fitness. And I work with women who are going to the gym for the first time. And I have to say, okay, well, if your goal is to get awareness, those women aren't reading those publications. So A is for awareness. Maybe that person is actually reading Self, Shape, something that's a little bit more of a gentler publication when it comes to fitness. That's where it would make sense to be seen. The B stands for buzz. So I like to think about buzz as when a movie is coming out. So let's say you're going to be releasing a course or a program. When a movie's coming out, you don't just hear about it once, you're hearing about it over and over again. The actors are on different podcasts. Someone's in a new relationship. Someone's relationship blew up. They're getting seen all over the place. So if you have something coming out, are you on a podcast tour and maybe doing 10 plus interviews this month? So people are hearing about your name all over the place to the point that they're kind of like, you know what? I keep hearing Lisa's name. Like, what is this about? I can't get away from her. The C now stands for credibility. So we had awareness, buzz, and credibility. And with credibility, this is when you're looking to build your thought leadership, your expert status. So getting featured in this publication, maybe Oxygen and Muscle and Fitness, going back to the previous example, this is the thing that's going to give you those as seen on logos. This will help you have your name in the same sentences as the people whose conferences you've attended, the people whose programs that you've bought. But it may not be the kind of exposure that's necessary necessarily going to be getting you clients immediately. It's just to have that as seen on logo on your site. So really check in with yourself and ask, okay, is my goal to build awareness? Is it to generate buzz, or is it to create credibility?
Yeah, absolutely. And then creating your hit list of, what are those publications for your ABCs? I love that. That's really simple and clear, and such a good reminder as well that, I think your example where if the audience isn't reading that publication, but it could be good for social proof because they've probably heard of it, then it's a different level of strategy as to why you're doing it. And you'll be thinking about, well, who is reading this publication and what is my message that's relevant for them? Because you're going to be talking to a different audience there. So you might be talking to your ideal customer avatar, maybe who's a little bit further along in their journey. They might not be right at the beginning of their journey. They've come a bit of a further way. So you're talking to people at a different level, and that means that you change your message a little bit. You change what it is that you're talking to them on, because you need to meet them at their level on that publication.
Those are exactly the words that I was going to say. You have to meet people where they're at. And I'm so privileged to work with a number of people who are just absolutely brilliant at what they do. And I even remember when I was working with identical twin chiropractors, and this is in 2015, they were like, Lisa, we want to do an article or a TV segment all about elbow and wrist alignment. Because 2015 was when we were getting front-facing cameras and people were doing this with their elbow and wrist all of a sudden. And I had to say to them, hey guys, love, that's boring. If I'm watching TV and I see latest on elbow and wrist alignment come up, I'm changing channels. However, a few weeks later, Kim Kardashian went to the UK and she reportedly took 1,500 selfies in a week. So I was like, hey guys, why don't we pitch this media a story on selfie elbow? What happens when you take 1,500 selfies in a week, just like Kim Kardashian did? And all of a sudden we took the same topic, but now we took it to it's not to say layman's terms or dumbing it down, but we took it to where the client was at, something that people would actually pay attention to, because if it's boring content, they're never even going to watch it. You're not going to have an opportunity to get your foot in the door with them. But when we reposition the content, now people were interested. And I remember, what was the order this went down in? If I recall correctly, we did an article on selfie elbow. A producer from the morning news saw it. She read it in a magazine, called the guys and was like, would love to have you come on a national morning show. One of the doctors did the show on selfie elbow. And then the producer of a radio show with like traffic on the ones and weather on the twos saw that and called the office and was like, hey, could you guys do a radio interview with us? So when we're able to take those things and translate them into a way other people are talking about, we also don't necessarily know, like once we get one opportunity, it could snowball into another and another and another.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was just that, I love what you just said, because such a simple tweak, but suddenly you made it relevant to people who are thinking, maybe we're not taking 1,500 selfies because we're not all Kim Kardashian, but you might be thinking, gosh, I didn't actually realize that I could be creating some damage to my hand and my wrist from taking selfies. Who knew? Like you've got a personal interest in reading that, which is the hook, right? That's why someone's going to open it up.
Exactly.
So with a media mix, so you're thinking, right, I want to get out, I want to create some visibility, I need to get out in front of new people. Okay, I've got that. Like, what do I do? How do I start? We've got the ABCs, but instead of just scattergunning, randomly here, randomly there, what would be a healthy media mix? And, why do we need to maybe take that overall view, like that look at it? Why do we need one?
Yeah, one of the things I always like to teach my clients and impart on them is that everybody likes to learn in a different way. So our ideal clients, they either have a preference of watching content, reading content, or listening to content. And honestly, chances are they do a mix of all three. But I always recommend get featured on one of each platform, written, audio, and visual, so that no matter how your ideal client likes to consume content, they're going to be able to listen to you or watch you or read you. An example I love to share with this one is my husband and I love to cook together in the kitchen. And a recipe that we do every few weeks is this delicious Thai red curry. But we do it so infrequently that I can't quite remember it off the top of my head. So I will turn it on YouTube and watch the video, pause it, do the activity, play, pause, do. And for him, he's just like, we've watched this video 10 times. I'm tired of watching this lady. Isn't there a blog post we can read and follow along with? So we both want to get to the same end destination, a delicious Thai red curry dinner, but we have different ways of wanting to get there. So make sure that you're showing up on a visual platform, being heard on an audio platform, and being read about, whether that's, having an article written about you, or you're the person who's writing the content.
That's so great. And what would you say, because I really love, I guess, leveraging my content. So I'm like, we're time poor. Well, I am, being a mum. I've got 2 kids, I've got my business, I've got clients. There's all sorts of things happening in my day. And, you can feel a bit overwhelmed with, wow, now I'm creating all my social content. Now I've got to add in, this visibility, PR, and get out to other platforms. Someone could be sitting there thinking, I'm feeling overwhelmed with how I'm going to fit this in. What would you say to somebody in terms of, well, actually, it doesn't have to necessarily create more work. It's just you could leverage this to use it more strategically within your own content as well. So do you have ways that you coach your clients on how they can leverage what they're doing for the visibility and actually turn that into other pieces of content too?
Yeah, I remember, and I always love to give credit where credit is due. So I remember attending a Speak to Sell bootcamp by Lisa Simone, and she said a line that will always stay with me. And it was, don't change your talk, change your audience. Don't change your talk, change your audience. And I just thought that was brilliant. So what is that one message that you can lather, rinse, and repeat and use over and over and over again? And quite frankly, get bored of listening to yourself speak, because it's important for you to be consistent, for you to show up with the same message, for people to be able to deliver that, or to develop, that trust in you. So for someone to be able to listen to your message over and over again on a number of different podcasts, that's a great way to create that familiarity. So something that I recommend to my clients that they do, and something that I do as well, is, a lot of us in our businesses, we have our own core methodologies. So earlier I shared the ABCs of visibility. So an example is, you could just do pitches on that over and over again. The honest truth is, I've been using the same podcast pitch since December of last year. But every time I have a conversation with somebody about it, it goes in a different direction. So I totally get it. I'm a publicist. I love doing this stuff all day, every day, finding new places, coming up with messaging. But for other business owners who aren't publicists, this is not necessarily what they want to spend their time doing. So really come up with, or figure out, what is that message you can use over again? Is it whatever your core framework, system, and methodology is? And you can talk about that kind of from like a bird's eye view, from a 30,000 foot perspective. Or when you think about your process that you take people through, maybe you have 3 or 5 steps that every single client moves through. What's that beginning step, that step 0, that step 1 that you have people do? And is there a way that you can talk about that over and over again? Because now you're creating that education that a potential client needs to have to be able to step up and work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 things popped up into my mind while you were talking there. I thought, that's such great tips. And when you've created this content for a podcast or an article, actually think you can also take that and share it with your existing audience. So, rather than then thinking it's some extra work on top of what you're already doing, take that article, share it as your social media, send it out to your email list. You can use that same content, and it, like you said, it's okay to be saying the same thing and to be using that same message, because I've had clients who say to me, well, I think I've heard that about 17 times and today it finally clicked. It's like, even your existing clients, even people who've been with you for a long time, sometimes they need to hear something over and over and over again before the penny really drops. Like, they might be going, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, I get it. And then one day it's like, oh, okay, now I get why that's so important. And they've got that vision. And that's why it's like, get bored of your own voice, get bored of your own message. Talk about the same things, because you're actually helping people get to grips with it. Your content really well, but they don't necessarily know it. You're creating the content and the message for the people who need it. And sometimes they'll need to hear it on repeat to actually have it land.
And one of the things I love is, one of my clients, her name is Nora. She's a preconception health coach. So she works with women who want to get pregnant. And she has her 4 R's for eating to get pregnant. Forgive me, Nora, if you're listening to this and I botched them, but really briefly, it's to remove inflammatory foods, replace them with foods that are good for you, repair your gut, and rebalance your digestive system, or something along those lines. And what's so cool is, she'll go on podcast after podcast after podcast talking about her 4 R's to eat to get pregnant. stagnant. And what's so cool is that when she gets on an enrollment call with somebody who's heard her on a podcast, they're repeating her 4R methodology to her because they've listened to a few podcasts. They know the system inside and out. And how powerful is it to get on a sales call with somebody who's already enrolled in your system? They just want to talk it out with you first. So it's a big difference between feeling like you're chasing clients and getting them to listen to your message and getting them to sign up with you versus actually really attracting the right people because they're hearing what you're saying and it's magnetic. They're like, yes, I resonate with that. Yes, I want that result. How do I get in touch with that person to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. So talk us through 10 ways that we can get free exposure and, really help us position as an expert authority, because this is all about creating authority, as you just mentioned, using your content, using your framework in many places, but we want to be reaching out into different audiences and finding our new people. So how could we do that?
Yeah. And it's funny because even as you say, what are 10 different ways? I'm like, ooh, that can feel overwhelming for some people, but I bet even if we break it down, it can actually feel super simple. So I talk about the ladder of publicity often, and we mentioned the healthy media mix earlier. Being heard, being seen, and being read about. So why not think about what are some different ways that I can be featured on each of those three categories? So when we think about being read, that means contributing an article. That could be being interviewed for a publication. It could be an online website. It could be a newspaper. It could be a magazine. There's so many different forms of written content. And even for somebody who wanted to get started, a tip that you can put into practice right now as you're listening to this is, let's say you're a skilled writer and you're already writing articles for your blog. Why not guest blog post on somebody else's site or contribute on another website? So the same content you would have written for your blog is now actually appearing in front of way more people. So something I might do is go on Google and type in Write for Us, WRITE for Us, online business, Write for Us publicity, Write for Us keto, Write for Us style, Write for Us relationships, Write for Us money, whatever your niche and your industry is. And when you type that in, you're going to get a bunch of sites that are looking for experts just like you to contribute their content. So that's a great way to get started with getting your writing out there on another platform. So we talked about maybe 3 different ways you can get featured within the written content category, websites, magazines, newspapers. Moving into being heard, this could mean being a guest on other people's podcasts, just like this conversation we're having today. Maybe that's moderating a room on Clubhouse. Maybe that's being a guest on a radio show like my clients were. Those are different ways to be heard. And then when it comes to being seen, it is so fun to play with this category and see how much it's evolved over the last 20 years. When I first got into public relations and visibility, television was the way that you would get seen. Speaking at live conferences was the way that you would get seen. And these still exist today, but we also have virtual conferences. We have Instagram lives on other people's account, LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live. Could we do a training in somebody else's mastermind? There's so many different ways that we can play around with getting seen now. So I think probably even just with that example, we've gone beyond 10 different ways. So maybe start by thinking about, okay, am I going to go for written content, audio content, or visual content? And then you can play within those categories to assess out which one might make the most sense for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't have to do all of them. It's about giving you lots of options to think, what's the one that I feel drawn to do first? What's something easy, especially because if you're not doing any of them right now, it could feel like a lot to suddenly think, oh, I've got to do all this stuff. Well, you don't have to do all of it. So what was the one that felt the easiest to you? Like if you currently write for your own blog, then writing for someone else's site would be super easy first step to take. If you currently do your own videos on your social media, then getting on and doing a guest with somebody else on their social media is easy. And I think that one of we're probably going to get onto this in a moment, what the number one mistake is that people to avoid when asking to get exposure. I think for me, when we're thinking, well, I want to get on that person's Instagram, how do I ask? And it's like, often the simplest way is to actually invite them onto yours first. You can actually think about how can you give in order to receive, because people will very easily reciprocate rather than, reaching out to somebody who you may not know of and just saying, hey, can I come on your Instagram? That could feel a little bit confronting for that person. So I'm not sure what you'd like to share with us, Lisa, but what do you think is the biggest mistake that we should be avoiding when we're asking for exposure on someone else's platform?
Yeah, hands down, the number one mistake is making it all about you and not leading with value. So imagine if I reached out and I was like, hey, I'm Lisa, I have a PR and visibility program, and I'd love to come on your podcast and talk about it. You would have hit delete on that email so quickly. Nobody is looking to give you a free advertisement. However, when you lead with value, when you think about, hey, what is the person on the other side of this email interested in and what did they want to create for their audience? And you can approach it rather than, hey, I'm Lisa Simone, I'm PR and visibility strategist, and I have a 6-month program. Can I come on your podcast? Versus, hey, I'm pretty sure that your audience is really paying attention to paid media and social media, but they may not be familiar with earned media, which is a great way to get exposure without having to pay for it. I could come on your show and they would leave learning these 3 things. Would that be valuable for your listeners? So when you're able to make it all about what's in it for the other person and you can lead with that value, that energy is absolutely going to translate and make a huge difference.
Yeah. And I'll just say that when Lisa reached out to me, it was the very first time. It was a no-brainer yes to her email to come on this podcast. And that is saying something because I've had a lot of people reach out to me. You know, I do a guest episode every single week. And so people who are researching podcasts go, wow, this podcast has lots of guests, let's reach out and see if we can get on it. But every single person apart from Lisa who's ever reached out to me has just sent me basically like, hey, look at me, I'm so great. You want me on your podcast? And it's like, fantastic, good on you for your whatever that is. But you haven't taken any time to think about what is the benefit that you're going to bring to my audience, not just about how great you are, but what is what is that relevance and what's the benefit to me as a podcast host as well? Because this isn't just about, I'm not sitting here desperately thinking, I need people for my podcast. Like anybody who comes across, I'm just going to say yes to. And that's almost what they're thinking, that people are like going to say yes to anybody. When you're pitching to somebody else, you think, well, you're asking them to invite you into their audience. And what a difference it is when somebody approaches, and like Lisa did with her approach to me, was all about my audience. It was all about what she could bring, the value that she could provide to my audience, but not about her. It wasn't about, hey, I'm so great and wonderful, you want me on your podcast. It was like, hey, I'd love to have this discussion. This would be really great for your podcast. I could tell that she'd read, listened to my podcast. I could tell that she'd done her research. It was a very personal note and it felt fantastic. I was like, this person really wants to come and give value. And the key was as well, how she was going to contribute and support this, because we're both giving up our time today to come on and have this chat. And she was very respectful of that and saying, and I'm going to contribute my time to this episode, but I'm also going to do these other things as well, because this is a collaboration. We're doing a collaboration today. So part of it is Lisa, I share my episode with my audience and she shares it as well, because it benefits both of us. We're having this. It's much more of a collaborative environment when you're doing that. And like you say, that is by far, from my experience, even just being a podcast host, the number one biggest mistake that everybody makes is not leading with any value, literally just sending me a promo of them. And it's incredible how many podcast booking agencies there are out there doing that. So if you're using one, and they're not pitching you in a way where they're saying what the value is that you're going to bring, then you need to run a mile and stop paying for them, because you're getting a lot of people just deleting that email and never responding.
And it's funny, like I definitely love for the podcast agencies out there. I've been a publicist for 20 years and I will acknowledge that I do not think I've ever once successfully pitched a client for a podcast. Podcast hosts like hearing from other people, not publicists. So even with my own clients, when I'm working with them, I'll help them find the right shows. I'll help them write an amazing pitch and it comes out of their inbox. Nobody needs to know that I even exist. Traditional media loves a publicist. Podcast, that gets their back up, or podcasters, that gets their back up and has them think, oh, this person wants to use me.
Totally, it comes across that way, but I think it's not necessarily the publicist approach. Like, I get it, you're busy and you've got someone doing that, but it's actually just in the way it's worded. And you can tell that the publicist is literally just farming out this standard email and it's just all about the person. So it's nothing about the value that they're going to bring, or the focus is on them and not on me when I'm receiving it, which is what I think feels so much like you just trying to use my platform.
I was going to say, I think a really good test to put your outreach through is when you're about to hit send on that email, just skim through the left paragraph or the left margin of your page. How many paragraphs begin with I, me, or my? And that's really going to help you see, am I talking from the perspective of creating value for the audience, or am I making this all about me? And it's really easy to just make a few simple shifts to say the same thing, but lead with the value for the audience versus making it all about yourself. It's the difference between saying, I would love to come on your show and talk about PR versus your audience has spent a lot of time building a business and they want to get seen. I would love to come and share a little bit more about how they can get visibility. Would that be helpful for them?
Absolutely. That is such an easy one. And it means that when you are starting to reach out to get some exposure, you can feel confident in just thinking, well, this is a way that you get a yes. Especially if you've tried before and maybe getting a no, just have a think about how you're doing that outreach. How are you providing value? Because it's what's in it for them. The person reading it, they need to be feeling like this is good for me. So if you're not doing that, then that would be something I would change and just see what the results are, right? So what the other thing would be great is, thinking about how do we get media opportunities landing in our inboxes? People actually reaching out to invite us to do media, which would be fantastic, because then we don't have to do that outreach ourselves. So what would you say would be the things that we should be thinking about in order to be attracting media opportunities?
Yeah, what the honest truth is, I always like to call it a media snowball. And I often tell my clients, get in there, hang on for the game, because that first hit is going to be the hardest. Getting that first opportunity, I find to be the most challenging. But once you've gotten it, you don't know who's going to see it, and more keep coming to you. So back in 2017, 2018, I used to pitch myself for stages all the time. And by 2019, 2020, I didn't need to apply anymore because people knew who I was. I showed up in enough places that I started getting invitations. So the honest truth is that getting visibility does start off as a proactive endeavor. You have to come up with the pitches, you get to send them out, and you get to get those yeses, and you get to move through the rejections of the no's too. But as you move through that and as you get your name out there, you're going to start developing a reputation for yourself where people start to know who you are. And then based on your showing up in different places, you're going to get those opportunities landing into your inbox. So typically I would say maybe it's going to be about 6 months of work. I'm not going to sell anyone and say, hey, this is make 6 figures in 6 weeks on the beach with your laptop. There is an upfront investment required of your time and energy. And then once you've put that in, that can pay off for the life cycle of your business. I love seeing clients that I worked with back in 2015, and I taught them, here's how to find the right TV producer. Here's how to do a great segment. Here's how to come up with a good pitch. They have those relationships now where producers just shoot them a text and they're like, hey, we have a slot on Wednesday at 9 a.m. Can you fill with a 7-minute segment on like cooking or fitness? So, do that first work in the beginning to get yourself out there. But then after that, it'll all become super easy and come your way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. It's like the long tail strategy, right? You've got to do the work to build the platform and then it will generate for you. Fantastic.
100%.
So you've got so much that you've shared with us today, and I know that we've scratched the surface and you've got so much more. So can you tell our audience, if they're wanting to dive in and learn more about how they can get more visibility and actually how to do some of this stuff, how can they learn more from you? What's the best way to find you?
Yeah, you know what? Every few weeks, I host a really intensive training, a free visibility training that shares how do I come up with my message? How do I figure out the right places to be seen? And how do I put myself out there so that the right people are seeing me? It's a free training called the Get the Word Out Workshop. So to register for the next one, and they help happen every few weeks. You probably don't have to wait more than 6 to 8 weeks for the next one. We have one coming up in May. You can head to www.finallygetthewordOut.com to go ahead and sign up for the free training.
Amazing. That is awesome. And I'll link that one up in the show notes for you as well. So you can just hop straight in there. That sounds fantastic because I know that there's so much, even when you've thought about, right, I know what to do now, but how do I write that pitch? Or what do I put in it? And all of the nitty gritty, the nuts and bolts of making it happen can still be quite a bit to get your head around when you haven't done it before. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today, Lisa. And do you have any final words that you wanted to leave with us today?
I think one thing that I say over and over again, consistently, Lisa, is that if you've spent the time listening to this interview for the last 30 plus minutes, don't just let this be a bunch of great notes and really good information. Really check in and say, okay, I loved everything I learned in that. Pat self on back. Hopefully you did. What's the one thing that you can take away and put into practice? What is that number one thing that you can implement, and start there? Don't let it just be great information. Let it create transformation.
Yes, absolutely. What's that action that you can take? Fantastic. Love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing so much of your knowledge with us today. This has been an excellent episode. I've enjoyed chatting with you, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Have you ever noticed that those who are perceived with authority in their area of expertise have a much easier time building an audience, making sales, and their business growth just seems almost effortless, right? Well, it's not about how much time they've been in business, how much experience they've got, or even their qualifications. Those things are not what creates authority. The one thing that does create authority is how well they've defined their specialization, aka their expertise or their niche. So if you're looking to have more visibility in your business, then you'll be very pleased to know that I'm hosting a live workshop for my Know Your Niche program members on the 6th of May. And it's all about how you can get really defined in your area of expertise so that you can create authority to be seen, to be visible online, to be able to build your audience and make those sales of premium clients too. Now, this live workshop is happening on the 6th of May. So if you join me before the 4th of May, then you're going to get this $297 program for only $127 when you join me before the 4th of May. Yes, you can join afterwards, and yes, there will be replays. But if you want to maximize this opportunity, then I recommend getting into Know Your Niche, doing the online program ahead of the live workshop, and then coming to the workshop to get my help, my feedback, and some coaching to really help you nail it, so that anybody else who looks at what it is that you do can clearly understand your area of expertise, what makes you different, and how you're going to stand out from the crowd. So head over to jessicaosborne.com/niche and get yourself enrolled in my Know Your Niche online program with the live workshop, and I'll see you on this 6th of May. Now, make sure you get in before the 4th so that you can get that special price of $127, down from usually $297. So it's an absolute bargain, and it's very well worth an hour or two of your time in getting clear on your specialization so that you can be bringing in those clients and making a much bigger return from any effort that you're putting into marketing your business. Once again, head over to jessicaosborne.com/niche and enroll in Know Your Niche today.